I'm Margaret Lewin and welcome to Margaret Lewin Quilting. Today I want to go over with you how I come about deciding how I'm going to quilt a quilt. So I've grabbed a whole bunch of quilts from inside my house and actually off my bed and have brought them out to the studio to film it for you. So the very first quilt that I want to show you, this is one of my designs. I named it Jelly Roll Blues, I believe. And I believe the free pattern to it is on my website. So if you pop over to my website, you can get it. This quilt is made with one jelly roll, and you can get up to a king size quilt with it. So you can go all the way from twin to king. The king is huge, okay? I mean, it was a little bit overkill. In fact, it's a little bit too big for my queen size bed. But how I decided on the quilting, and I'll take some close-ups and set them in here so that you can see it, is I really wanted the quilting to blend into the fabric. I didn't want it to stand out as much as I wanted it to give just a little bit more design. So when I quilted it, I chose to quilt it with two different thread colors. The first one was the background, and I believe I used Sands of Time, which is a King Tut thread. And in the blue, I quilted it with a blue thread by King Tut, and it's actually called Brooklet. And this is the basic block of the quilt, okay? And I'm gonna flip it over and show you the back side of it now. Well, first let me start with the front side. If you see on the front side, you really don't see a lot of the quilting. You do see the puffiness and you can see the design, but you don't see a ton of it. If I flip it over though and show you the back of it, you now should be able to see the design in here and in the border. Now this block that I use to quilt this block right here, let me double check. Yep, this block right here that I used to quilt it, this actually was not a block. It was two triangles that I connected together to form a block. And the reason why I did that was because I liked a couple of the aspects of it. Number one, I really liked the fact, let me get you an open spot. I really liked the fact that it connected and became a continuous pattern. That's the first thing. I liked that the points altered where they connected. And I liked the fact that it had a little bit of tightness, but yet a little bit of openness. And what I mean by that is, you've got tightness from here to here, but you've got open from here to here. And what that tends to do is make the quilt pucker just a little bit more. So that's this quilt. How I came about the decision on how I wanted to quilt it was I just wanted a functional quilt that had a little bit of softness to it because it was going in our bedroom. So I felt like I really accomplished it. It doesn't have any flowers in it. It doesn't have any feathers in it. It's just a simple pattern, and I believe it's by the Methodist quilter is the one who did the quilting, designed the quilting pattern on it. And I just really like it. I think it turned out really nice. It's great because it doesn't scream man, it doesn't scream woman. It just is a pretty functional quilt. So that's this one. The next one I'm going to show you, let me stick this down below. The next one I'm going to show you is also another one of my designs. Now this is, I believe this is Fig Tree's fabric line. I'm not sure. Or maybe V&. Company. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But anyhow, this quilt is one of my designs, and it took me about 2 hours to put it together, maybe 3. You know, it wasn't long at all. And I wanted this quilt just as a functional quilt. It actually sits over my foot stand on my chair. I have a chair that I can relax on, and I'll take a picture of it and stick it in here for you. I sit in the chair to do handwork. So that's what that's all about. So this is the quilt. Now you can see on here, I think, this one's pretty tightly quilted, which to me is, I like tight quilting. I don't like quilting so tight that you don't get any of the puffing or puckering. Like this one's got a lot of nice puffing. Part of that's because of the quilting pattern, and the other part of it is because I used wool batting. So this one, I'll flip it over and hopefully you can see the back of it. This pattern again does that really tight. I'll point to where it's right through here. It's really, really tight. And up here again, it's really tight. And then it gives a little bit of openness in these areas. And what that does again is it gives you that, or it gives me that kind of antique-y look, that look that it says to me, come cuddle with me. And honestly, that's what quilts are to me. My quilts, with the exception of the double wedding rings that I totally made by hand and totally quilted by hand, my quilts are all functional. They are on my furniture. They are on the beds. I take my quilts from wherever they are, and when they need to be washed, they get dropped in the washer, they get dropped in the dryer, and off I go again. There really aren't any quilts that I consider offhands to anybody. I love all of them, and it's just the way they are. One other exception, I have an embroidered one that I'm going to show you. That one is kind of special to me, only because of the amount of time that it took me to do it. But anyhow, I'll show you that one in just a minute. So this is Layer Cake Love, and again, the pattern to this is sitting on my website, and it's a freebie, so go grab it. So I'm going to fold this one up, and I will insert close-ups so that you guys can see it. This next quilt is a design by Jen Peglow, I believe is how you pronounce her name. She's the designer of the Quick Curve Ruler. So if you ever have to do any kinds of curves, get a hold of Jenny's ruler, because it is just wonderful. It's the name of her company is So Kind of Wonderful. And it just is beyond simple to do a curve. In fact, if you pin it, you'll get yourself into more trouble than if you don't pin it. So don't pin it when you put it together. But here's this quilt. And I think you can see that although you see all the puckering from the quilting, this has been washed, you really don't see the quilting thread. Well, one of the things I wanted to point out to you in this is a lot of people think, oh, I've got to use a solid because I want it to be solid. I don't want to show a variation in the thread color. Believe it or not, this entire quilt is quilted with variegated thread, every single piece. And the reason why you're really not seeing that it's variegated is because the variegation in King Tut threads is just really nicely spaced. So what tends to happen with it is it tends to just blend into the different colors in the fabric, because fabric isn't to me there's a living, well, not a living, to me there's an element about fabric that speaks more than one tone. So by using, or more than one color, so by using variegated thread, believe it or not, it just reads nice and solid even though it isn't. So that's that one, and you can hear my dogs outside. I also wanted to tell you that the first quilt I showed you, this one, that was also quilted with a variegated thread. It was not used with a, it was not quilted with a solid color thread. So the next quilt that I want to show you, this is a jelly roll quilt. I made it up, I'm going to lose my pile of quilts here. I made it up because I needed something to quilt. And it really wasn't my kind of quilt. I wasn't drastically in love with that. But again, I quilted my normal, tight plus open design. And this is the design here. I'll put a close-up in. And And I really, really liked it once I got done quilting it. But what I didn't like that I ended up doing was I put a really, really busy print on the back. So what ends up happening is you can see my quilting on the front, and believe me, this took a long time to quilt because it's pretty, it's pretty dense. It's not real dense, but it's bordering on real dense. So I put all of that work into it, and you can't see any of the quilting from the back at all. So that's really something that I want to make sure you understand, is that when you pick out your backing or you pick out your quilt design, make certain that it's going to reflect the way you want it to, because sometimes you don't see the quilting at all. On this one, the one that was on our bed, you really don't see the blue as much as you see it in the background. So again, if I really wanted to show off my quilting, I didn't succeed on it in the blue spots, but I did in the background fabric. So I wanted you to see that, and I've got another example of this next. So this is the next quilt. Now this is, I taught a class. This is a Meg Hockey of crabapple tree designs, and it's an embroidery piece. And here it is. And yes, each block was hand embroidered, and it is the entire alphabet. It's called A to Z Snowman. And I wanted to point something out to you in this border, and I don't know that I'm even going to be able to get you to be able to see it with the camera. On the border, I spent hours cutting apart a design and putting it back together again to be able to quilt it in the border. And what the design is, it is a, see if I can find it, it is a sleigh. Here's the first sleigh that has Santa on it. There's a second sleigh that has Mrs. Claus on it. And then there's a third sleigh that has a baby snowman on it. What I was trying to do was create a family of snowmen to mimic this quilt of all snowmen, snow people, and I didn't accomplish it. The reason why I didn't accomplish it is because my border fabric is so busy that you can't see what I did. So make certain when you're picking out designs for your quilt, if you've got a really busy border, do not spend a ton of money getting it quilted really special. Put a border design on it that looks nice, but don't go overboard because you can't always see it. The other thing I wanted to show you on this quilt is, I think you can see on the front of it that this is all snowflakes. The whole thing is snowflakes. And if I flip it over, I'm going to show you once again, the backing fabric is so busy that you don't see the design in it at all. It's gone. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I really love it when people use a solid or a backing that reads solid, because then I've got two quilts. It's like with this quilt here, I've got two complete quilts. When I want, every once in a while, I'll flip it over and I'll just have the back side as my quilt. And it looks like, you know, something that a one piece of fabric that's all nicely quilted. So I wanted to show you that one. The next one that I have up is something that I did. Oh, this A to Z Snowman, that was actually a class I taught. So that's one of those other quilts that's pretty special to me. But yet I use it. So this next quilt is one that I did for another class. And this is I just lost all my quilts on the floor. This is a pattern that uses a jelly roll and a layer cake. And I made it years and years ago. This was a true utility quilt. And yes, I have two borders on it. But I just quilted this one in a simple edge to edge. Nothing fancy, just quilted it. You can tell I've washed it a few times. And you can see the quilting a little bit on the back. Maybe I need to wash it again. Anyhow, you could see the quilting on the back of this one. To me, I love utility quilts. I'm not afraid to take this outside and throw it in the yard and have a picnic. This is exactly what this is to me. This is just a real fun quilt. Now, my Snowman, I would never take this outside and throw it in the grass and sit on it. Just not something I would ever do. And most of that is because of the handwork on the front. It took a long time to do that, and I just wouldn't do that. So that's that quilt. I've got 3 more here to show you, just so that you know that I don't always quilt the quilts I make. This quilt is one that actually sits on the back of the rocking chair in my living room a lot. And this quilt is a raw edge quilt. So you cut your pieces out and you just put them one on top of the other and you top stitch it. It's got a border. And then how I quilted this one was on my domestic machine. I just did straight stitches right down. That was the end of it. It was all done. It gets thrown in and out of the washer. And when I flip it over, you're going to see how busy the back is. You can't tell what I did with the quilting on the back because of the fact that it's pretty busy. So there's that one. Then the next one I have to show you is another one that I did hand piecing with. It's got a lot of handwork with it. This is a row by row quilt. And I did all of these with the hand buttonhole stitch. And more of these down here, more of it. And then I just took and put strips of fabric. Let's see if I can hold it up. Strips of fabric in between. Now, I did not quilt this one, somebody else did, but I absolutely love it. And you can see. And then I'm going to flip it over and show you the back of it. And again, I've just got plain white backing. And I like the plain white backing. This one even has a stain on it. I think I better try to wash it again. So there's that one. Now, the last one that I want to show you, is another design that I've done. And this one, I have, where's the other one? There it is. Let me grab the other one. I've actually got 2 more to show you. So this next one, I'll show you, is my test quilt. This one is my test quilt for this one. So this is what I did. I took a jelly roll, pretty certain it was a jelly roll, and I just played with it. I had no idea what it was going to turn out like. It's all batiks, and I simply played with it. And this is how I came up with, I think it's called layered to a T. So it must be made with a layer cake. But here's the T. 2 strips and then 1 across. That's the T. But how I quilted this was a test. It was the first quilt to determine whether or not the pattern would work. So I decided that I was going to do the same thing on the back. So on the back of this is, I just tested out a whole bunch of different quilting patterns. I wanted to see how they quilted out, and I wanted to play with them. So this is a combination of free motion. It is a combination of intricate designs. It's got designs that I made on my Statler. It's got a whole bunch of different things in it. So that was the test quilt. This sits on the back of our couch right now. And it also has wool batting in it. So it's nice and warm for our winters up here in New York. that was the test one. I had a thread. That was the test one for ended up being this quilt, which you've seen it in as a backdrop in some of my other videos. But here's the front of it, and then here's the back of it. And I love the back of it too. I just think it looks really cool when you can see the quilting design on the back. And again, this was done with a variegated thread, believe it or not. And here's your front again. It's an edge-to-edge design, and what that means is it starts at one edge of the quilt and it quilts all the way over to the other edge of the quilt from the top to the bottom. So it's a fairly simple and inexpensive way to have a quilt quilted. So I wanted to show that to you. So in answer to everybody's questions, I do long arm for customers. I don't only do my work, I do customers' works too. And I have a couple of quilt shops in the area where I live that send me quilts, and customers that bring quilts out to my studio and ask me to please quilt them, and people who ship quilts to me and ask me to quilt them. So I wanted to show you all of these. The next time you meet with your long armer to decide how you're going to quilt the quilt, keep in mind a couple of things. If you've got a really, really busy quilt on the front, you're not going to necessarily really see the quilting. So keep that in mind when you're doing it. If you've got a quilt that in areas reads solid or is of a solid fabric, that's the perfect opportunity for your long armer to show off what they can do with their long arm machine. It's a nice place to put a real punch of quilting. And remember, take a look at your threads, because variegated threads don't always read variegated once they're on the quilt. They tend to me to give the quilt more dimension. I just really like variegated threads. I think they're great. They can be difficult to get the tension right, but I love them and I keep using them. So thank you so much for joining me today. I will insert a bunch of close-up shots of these quilts so that you can see what they look like a little bit better. Obviously, it's difficult for me to hold them up, especially the huge one in the back there. And I did want you to get a glimpse of my quilt, my long arm. See if I can get it over here so you can see it. Here's my long arm. And you can definitely see the monitor right over there. And this is where I stand most of the time, on the other side, in front of my bookcase, and I look out to the most gorgeous apple orchard in this world that right now is in full blossom. So I will also insert a picture of that so you can see what it looks like. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions about any of these quilts, don't hesitate to ask. Don't forget to pop over to my website and download those free patterns. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up so that I know that this is something that you like. Thanks so much, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.